Good evening. You're listening to Efferalgang Radio, and this is your friend Alistair reads you a bedtime story.
Your friend Alistair reads you bedtime story. Your friend Alistair reads you bedtime story.
So tonight I'm going to be reading a short story by Juan Rulfo. He is a Mexican writer who is also a photographer. I encourage you to go and read about him. He is an amazing writer. I had a hard time picking one short story because everything that he writes is so different, and I was trying to pick one that kind of captured him, but he's just so versatile that it was hard. The one I'm going to read tonight is called The Man. The first two-thirds of it take there's a dialogue between two people. It's not necessarily it's very fluid, and it's not necessarily so clear as it weaves in and out. And then the last third is told from the perspective of a new character, the sheep herder. So, and if anyone's listening, just let me know if the sound is okay. But I'm just going to go right for it. The Man. The man's feet sank into the sand, leaving a formless footprint, as if it had been made by an animal's hoof. They climbed onto the stones, digging in when they felt the steep rise, and then they walked upward, looking for the horizon. "Flat feet," said the man, following him, "and one toe missing. He's missing the big toe on his left foot. There aren't many people like that around here, so it'll be easy." The path went up, among the weeds, full of thorns and ground scrub. It was so narrow it looked like an ant's path. It went up to the sky without switchbacks. It would get lost farther along and then reappear later under a still more distant sky. The feet continued along the path, never leaving it. The man walked with his weight on the calluses of his heels, scraping the rocks with his toenails, scratching his arms, stopping at each horizon to take the measure of his objective. "Not mine, but his," he said, and he turned his head to see who had spoken. Not a speck of wind, only the echoes of the sounds he made among the broken branches. Wary of feeling his way along, calculating his steps, holding even his breath. "I'm headed for what I'm headed for," he said again, and he realized it was he who was talking. "He climbed up here, raking the mountain," said the man pursuing him. "He cut the branches with a machete." It was clear that nerves were pulling him along, and nerves always leave their mark. That's what will do him in. He began to lose hope when the hours got longer, and beyond the horizon there was another, and the mountain he was climbing wouldn't end. He took out the machete and cut the branches that were hard as roots and slashed the grass at the root. He chewed on some murky phlegm and spit it out angrily at the soil. He sucked his teeth and spat once again. The sky was calm above, quiet, translucent clouds visible between the silhouettes of the leafless calabash trees. It wasn't leaf season. It was dry season, harsh with thorns and dry, silvery stalks. He anxiously slashed the thickets with his machete. "It will get damaged with this kind of work. You'd better leave well enough alone." He heard his own voice from behind. "His own anger identified him," said the pursuer. "He's told us who he is. It's now just a matter of finding out where he is. I'll finish climbing where he climbed, and then I'll go down where he went down, tracking him until he's exhausted. And where I stop, that's where he'll be. He'll get down on his knees and ask for forgiveness, and I'll let go with a bullet to the back of his head. That's what will happen when I find you. Finally, he got there. Only the pure sky, ashen, half burned by the cloudless of the night. The earth had fallen away on the other side. He looked at the house in front of him, from which the last smoke from the dying coals emerged. He dug himself into the soft, recently turned soil. He tapped the door with the handle of his machete, without intending to. A dog came over and licked his knees. Another one ran around him, wagging its tail. Then he pushed the door that had been closed only to the night. The man pursuing him said, "He did his job well. He didn't even wake them up. He must have gotten there around 1, when sleep is heavier, when dreams begin. After rest in peace, when one lets life slip into the hands of the night, and when the body's tiredness scrapes the strings of distrust and breaks them." "I shouldn't have killed them all," said the man. "At least not all of them." That's what he said. The dawn was gray, full of cold air. He went down towards the other side, slipping on the grass. When the cold numbed his hands, he let go of the machete he was holding tightly in his hand. He left it there. He saw it shining like a piece of lifeless snake among the dry spikes. The man went down, looking for the river, opening a new path between the mountains. Far below, the river runs, swirling its waters among the flowering cypresses, silently rocking its thick current. It goes one way and then turns back on itself. It goes and comes like a twisted serpentine on the green earth. It makes no sound. You could sleep there next to it and you would hear your own breathing, but not the river's. Vines descend from the tall cypresses and plunge into the water, join hands and form spider webs the river never unweaves. The man found the line of the river from the yellow of the cypresses. He didn't hear it. He could only see it twisting under the shadows. He saw the chachalacas coming. The afternoon before, they had gone over following the sun, flying in flocks behind the light. Now the sun was about to come up, and they were coming back. He crossed himself 3 times. "Forgive me," he said to them, and he got to work. By the time he reached the 3rd one, buckets of tears were falling from his eyes. Or perhaps it was sweat. It's a hard thing to kill. The human body is tough. It defends itself even as it resigns itself. And the machete was dull. "You'll have to forgive me," he said to them again. He sat on the sand on the beach, his pursuer said. He sat down here and didn't move for a long time. He waited until the clouds were gone, but the sun didn't come out that day or the next. I remember. It was the Sunday our newborn died, and we went to bury him. We weren't sad. The only memory I have is that the sky was gray and the flowers we were carrying were faded and drooping as if they felt the lack of sun. The man stayed here, waiting. His footprints were there, the nest he made near the bushes, the warmth of his body opening a well in the damp earth. I shouldn't have left the path, thought the man. I would have already been there, but it's dangerous to walk where everyone walks, especially bearing this burden I bear. The burden has to be obvious to any eye looking at me. It has to be obvious, as if it were a strange swelling. That's how I felt. That's how I feel it. When I felt a cut on my finger, people saw it and I didn't until afterward. That's the way it is now, although it's not what I want. I have to have some sign. That's how I feel it because of this burden. Or maybe the effort made me tired. Then he adds, I shouldn't have killed them all. I should have been satisfied with the one I needed to kill. But it was dark and the shapes all looked the same. In the end, it will be cheaper for them to be buried in a group. You'll get tired before I do. I'll get to where you want to be before you get there, said the man who was after him. I know your intentions from memory, who you are and where you're from and where you're going. I'll get there before you do. This isn't the place, said the man when he saw the river. I'll cross it here and then maybe over there and maybe I'll come out on the same bank. I have to be on the other side where no one knows me, where I've never been and no one knows about me. Then I'll walk straight on until I get there. No one will take me out of there. More flocks of chachalacas passed overhead, crowing with deafening shrieks. I'll walk farther downstream. The river becomes a tangle here, and it might bring me back to where I don't want to be. No one will ever hurt you, son. I'm here to protect you. That's why I was born before you, and my bones hardened before yours did. He heard his own voice, slowly emerging from his mouth. He felt it sounding like something false, without meaning. Why would he have said that? His son must be laughing at him now. Or maybe not. Maybe he's full of rancor at me for having left him alone in our final hour. Because it was mine as well. It was only mine. He came for me. He wasn't looking for you. I was simply the end of his trip. The face he dreamed of seeing dead, rubbed in the mud, kicked and stomped on until it was disfigured. The same thing I did to his brother, but I did it face to face. Jose Alcancia, right in front of him, and right in front of you, and all you did was cry and shake from fear. From that time on, I knew who you were, and how you'd come looking for me. I waited a month for you, awake night and day, knowing you would come crawling, hidden like an evil snake. And you got there late, and I got there late too. I got there after you. I was occupied by my newborn's burial. Now I understand. Now I understand why the flowers were drooping in my hand. I shouldn't have killed them all, the man went on thinking. It wasn't worth putting the heavy burden of the third one on my back. The dead weigh more than the living. They crush you. I should have felt them one by one until I got him. I would have recognized him by his mustache. Even though it was dark, I would have known where to hit him before he woke up. In the end, it was better that way. Nobody will cry over them, and I'll live in peace. The thing is how to find a way out of here before night gets hold of me. The man entered the river's narrows in the afternoon. The sun had not come out all day, but the light had warped, turning the shadows around. That's how he knew it was afternoon. You're trapped, said the man who was after him, who was now sitting on the river bank. You've cornered yourself, first by committing your evil deed, and now by boxing yourself in your own box. It isn't worth it for me to follow you there. You'll have to come back when you find yourself hemmed in. I'll wait for you here. I'll take advantage of the time by focusing on my target, by deciding where I'll put a bullet into you. I can be patient, and you can't, so that's my advantage. My heart skips and twirls in its own blood, while yours is broken, shriveled, and rotting away. That's my advantage too. Tomorrow, you'll be dead, or maybe the day after tomorrow, or in 8 days. Time doesn't matter. I can be patient. The man saw that the river was being boxed in between high walls, and he stopped. I'll have to go back, he said. The river in that section is wide and deep with no rocks to hit. It slides along its path like thick and dirty oil. And every so often it swallows some branches in its eddies, sucking it down with no complaint being heard. Son, said the man who was sitting and waiting, it isn't worth it for me to tell you that the man who killed you is dead from this minute on. What will it get me? The thing is, I wasn't with you. What's the point of explaining anything? I wasn't with you, that's all. Nor with her, nor with him. I wasn't with anyone, because the newborn didn't leave me with any sign of remembrance. The man walked a long way upriver. Bubbles of blood leaped in his head. I thought the first one would wake up the others with his death rattle. That's why I hurried. Sorry for the hurry, he told them, and then he felt like the gurgling noise was like the snoring of people sleeping. That's why he became so calm when he went outside to the night, to the cold of that cloudy night. It was like he was running away when he came. He had a bunch of mud up to his shanks, so you couldn't even tell what color his pants were. I first saw him when he plunged into the river. He shook his body and then he let the current take him without moving his arms as if he were walking on the bottom. Then he crawled back onto the bank and put his clothes out to dry. I saw him shivering with cold. It was windy and cloudy. I was peeking around the edge of the fence where my boss had me in charge of the sheep. I would go back and watch him without him suspecting that someone was spying on him. He levered himself up on his arms, stretched and relaxed his person, airing out his body so it could dry. Then he put himself into his shirt and pants. They were all full of holes. I saw he wasn't carrying a machete or any other weapon, just an empty holster that was hanging from his waist, like an orphan. He looked and looked all around again, and then he left. I was about to stand up to move my sheep when I saw him again, still with that hint of disorientation. He got into the river again, in the middle part, on his way back. What's that man up to? I asked myself. And then nothing. He went back into the river, and the current took him and screwed him around like a pinwheel, and he almost drowned. He moved his arms around a lot, and in the end he wasn't able to cross over, and he came out downstream, throwing up so much water you'd think his guts would come out. He went through that process again of drying himself naked, and then he took himself upstream along the way he'd come. I wish they would give him to me right now. If I had known then what he had done, I would have smashed his head in with rocks, and I wouldn't even feel remorse. I said even then he was a fugitive. You just had to see his face. But I'm not a fortune teller, Signor Licenciado. I just take care of my sheep, and I'm, even if you like it, a little fearful depending on the circumstances. Although, like you say, I could have easily taken him by surprise. A well aimed stone to his head would have laid him out. No one would doubt that you're right. Now that you're telling me about all the deaths that are owed to him and that he had just effected, I can't forgive myself. I like killing killers. Believe me. It's not a habit, but it must feel delicious to help God be done with those children of evil. The thing is, not everything ended there. I saw him come back the next day, but I still didn't know anything. If only I had known. He looked thinner than the day before, with his bones almost outside of his hide and his shirt in rags. I didn't think it was him. That's how unrecognizable he was. I recognized him by the look in his eyes, kind of hard as if they hurt. I saw him take a mouthful of water like someone rinsing out his mouth. But what happened was that he had swallowed a good handful of ajolotes because the muddy pool he was drinking from was shallow and it was chock full of ajolotes. He must have been hungry. I saw his eyes, which were like two dark holes like caves. He came close to me and said, "Are those sheep yours?" I told him no. They belong to whoever brought them into this world. That's what I told him. He didn't find it funny. He didn't even crack a smile. He grabbed the sturdiest of my sheep, and with his hands he turned her upside down and sucked from her teat. You could hear the animals bleeding from where I was, but he wouldn't let her go. He sucked and sucked until he was tired of suckling. Just to tell you, I had to put creolina on the udders to bring down the inflammation so the bites the man gave her wouldn't get infected. You say he killed the entire family? If I had known, I would have held him there by smacking him with a piece of firewood. But one doesn't know. One lives isolated on the mountain with no contact except with the sheep, and sheep don't know any gossip. The next day he showed up again. He got there when I got there, and we even became friendly. He told me he wasn't from around here, that he was from somewhere far away, but he couldn't go on because his legs were giving out. I walk, and I don't get anywhere. My legs are weak and buckling on me, and my home is far away, farther than those mountains. He had told me that for 2 days he had eaten nothing but wild greens. That's what he told me. You say he had no pity when he killed the members of the family? If I had known, he would have received his judgment open mouthed while he was drinking my sheep's milk. But he didn't look evil. He told me about his wife and kids and how far away they were. He sniffled when he thought about them. And he was very skinny, as thin as a rail. Just yesterday, he ate a piece of an animal that had been hit by lightning. Part of it had surely been eaten by ants, and the rest he roasted on the coals I was burning to warm up my tortillas, and he finished it off. He licked the bones clean. That animal died from disease, I said to him. But it wasn't as if he was listening. He swallowed it whole. He was hungry. But you say he ended the lives of those people? If only I had known. You see what it's like to be ignorant and trusting? I'm nothing but a sheep herder, and beyond that I don't know much. And to tell you he ate my own tortillas and dipped them into my plate? So now that I've come here to tell you what I know, I end up being an accomplice? Who would think that? And you say I'll go to jail for having helped the man hide? I'm not the one who killed that family. I've only come to tell you that over there in a muddy pool there's a dead man. And you complain that since when and how and what's that man like? And now that I've told you I'm the accomplice, who would think that? Believe me, Signor Licenciado, if I had known who that man was, I would have figured out a way to kill him. But what did I know? I'm not a fortune teller. He only asked me for something to eat and told me about his children, dripping in tears. And now he's dead. I thought he had put out his clothes to dry on the rocks in the river, but it was him, all of him, who was face down there with his face in the water. At first I thought he had bent over the river and couldn't lift his head and then had started to breathe in water until I saw the coagulated blood that had come out of his mouth and the back of his head full of holes as if someone had drilled it through. I'm not going to figure that all out. I only come to tell you what happened without subtracting or adding anything else. I'm a sheep herder, and I don't know anything else.